You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to the Successful Screenwriter Podcast, where we discuss anything and everything screenwriting. Here we interview successful screenwriters and filmmakers to find out just what it takes to make it in the industry. Just a heads up, this episode is brought to you by my book, The Guide for Every Screenwriter, which has been listed as one of the best screenwriting books of all time by the Book Authority. If you're looking for something that reveals the secrets of screenwriting in an easy to understand and engaging way, then this is the book for you. You can find The Guide for Every Screenwriter at thesuccessfulscreenwriter.com/books. Now, on to the show.
Space. Okay, good.
All right. Welcome to the podcast. What an amazing guest we have on today. Rich Wilkes has written such amazing Hollywood classics like XXx and Airheads. Rich, thanks for being on with us.
Hey, man. Thank you. Thank you, Jeffrey, for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, this is just amazing. I mean, I love your work, and it's your voice as a screenwriter is so different. If I look at something like XXx and I compare that to the comedy of Airheads, it's all over the place, but it's still rock and roll, which is pretty awesome. But before we get into that, I do want to get a little bit of your origin story of kind of what led you towards those successes.
Sure. I did undergrad in theater at UC Santa Cruz. And it was there that I met people whose parents, they were from LA and their parents worked in the film industry. And I was, that was the first time I'd heard that was, you could possibly get into the film industry.
You could actually do it.
Yeah. So after Santa Cruz, I came down to LA and I went to the American Film Institute in the screenwriting program.
Okay.
And I wrote a screenplay. It's a 2 years master program, but I wrote a screenplay in the first year that got optioned by Touchstone Pictures.
Wow.
So I dropped out of school and I got into the Writers Guild based on that script. And that's what I've been doing ever since. And that was 30 years ago.
Did that script get made?
Yes, eventually did. I directed it. It was something I wrote and directed called Glory Days, a little $700,000 movie. It was the first starring role for Ben Affleck.
Oh,
Ben
wow.
Affleck and Sam Rockwell. And it got lost in the Miramax shuffle, and I don't know who owns the rights to it or where it is, but it's got Matthew McConaughey and Matt Damon and Spalding Gray and Alyssa Milano and
okay, I need to find this film. That sounds amazing. So you killed it out of the gate. How did you end up landing a role like XXx?
Well, first I had done the comedy stuff with Airheads, and that led me to work a little bit with Adam Sandler.
Okay.
So I was doing the comedy thing, but writers and actors and directors, nobody wants to be pigeonholed as one thing. God forbid you get good at something.
Right.
So I decided I need to switch to do like independent film stuff. So I wrote and directed this movie, Glory Days, I was just telling you about.
Yeah.
After that, that thing didn't make any money. I couldn't get money to direct something else. So I decided I better write something that will make money, rather than trying to be, Quentin Tarantino. So I put my thinking cap on and tried to think of an action movie franchise.
Right.
Because those are perennial, people have been going to see James Bond for 50 years.
Makes sense.
So I came up with a version of it, which is the X Games version of James Bond. James Bond goes skiing in Gstaad and drinks martinis. Well, this is the guy who goes snowboarding and drinks beer.
Right.
And it fit in perfectly with the music, because they had, they were trying to make Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible really, really hip by using Limp Bizkit on the soundtrack and stuff.
Yeah, that whole new metal wave.
Yes. And it didn't fit. So that's what I jumped onto. And the pitch was literally what I just gave you. It's, the 3 sentences I gave you. And in the room, Todd Garner said, yes, let's do it. I wrote the script in a month and a half. A month later, we had Vin Diesel and a director. 7 months later, we were shooting. 7 months after that, it was in theaters.
Wow.
It was just a crazy nonstop ride. But we picked up Vin right after Fast and the Furious. It was before it came out that we got him. And so that was his next big movie the following summer. And it worked, it spawned a franchise.
It sure
and
did.
It put me into a different category of writer. And you get these opportunities afterwards, to work on other action things. And what you find out, or what I found out, is those things are very big budget and it's very hard to get them made. So I got one made really, really easily. And then I wrote several more of those big kind of movies that didn't go.
Okay.
Like I wrote a Castle Wolfenstein movie based on the video game.
Oh, wow. That'd have been amazing.
Yeah. And I wrote a Kung Fu movie based on the old TV show that now is, again, a TV show. Yeah. I wrote a Marvel movie that didn't get made. So I wrote a lot of, big budget action kind of movies that didn't get made.
Well, were these specs, or were you were these getting option? You're getting paid to write them.
Yeah, I was getting hired to write them.
Okay.
From the, whoever owned the rights to whatever.
Okay.
So that's how I made my living, by writing scripts that were not getting produced.
Well, that's got to be frustrating, though.
I don't want to go there yet. But on this,
okay.
I was also doing, biopics. I wrote the Dirt movie, which is the Motley Crue biopic.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that one took 17 years to get made, but it finally got made. And then I wrote a Sam Kinison biopic with Sam Kinison's, based on Sam Kinison's brother's book. And that's been 13 years. I'm still waiting for that one to get made. And then I wrote, there's a best-selling book, this nonfiction book that I was doing with the Russo brothers before they blew up with Marvel.
Yeah.
And we tried for years to get that one made, The Ballad of the Whiskey Robber, and could not get that one made. So I've had this evolution of starting with comedy involving rock and roll. Then I went into action involving rock and roll. And then I go into a biopic about rock and roll. And so I've sort of
you're in this niche. Yeah.
I've used the music to bridge the gap between comedy and action and biopic. And so that's sort of the sweet spot where I am now. If something comes up with rock and roll in the name, I wind up getting a call. Yeah, which is great. That's what I love.
Is music very important to your life? Is this something that you find really influences your writing in general?
Yes, absolutely. The way music is so, it just takes you away to, I talked to Nikki Sixx about this.
Okay.
Bass player from Motley Crue. The alchemy of 3, 4, 5, however many people playing an instrument together. And if you took them all apart, it's just a drum beat or a bass line, but you stick all 4 of them together and it's this alchemy that's bigger than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
And it evokes these emotions and puts you in a time and place that you're going to remember forever, when that album came out, whatever.
Right.
So there's such power to that. I'm really drawn to it, but I'm not a musician. So for whatever reason, I'm attracted to stories in film that have a lot of music in them.
Interesting.
And a guy like Tarantino, I keep bringing him up, but the stuff he drops into his soundtracks, I mean, it's just genius to have the human beings play during a sword fight in Kill Bill 1. Yeah.
He's got to be an audiophile. I mean, the guy's taste in music is incredible. But well, going back to Airheads, I remember seeing this movie when it first came out, and I thought, this is the oddest, quirkiest comedy, but it works. And I thought it was really, and you're talking Steve Buscemi, you've got Sandler, you've got Brent Fraser, I think pre-Mummy. So, I mean, you had a pretty great cast.
Yeah.
When you end up working with talent like this, or like with Vin Diesel, do they ever come in? Do they have any changes they want to make to lines or to the script? Do they improv?
It depends on the movie. It depends on the actor. I've not had a lot of experience where an actor comes in and says, I don't like this, I want to rewrite the dialogue or whatever.
Okay.
At the time I was working with Sandler on Airheads, that was his first studio movie. He didn't have that kind of pull if that's what he wanted to do. He changed a few lines to make them funnier. And, we had guys like Michael McKean in there from Spinal Tap and Chris Farley.
Wow.
You're not going to tell those guys how to be funny. But I've not had the experience like with Vin Diesel coming in and making these ridiculous changes.
Awesome.
There's certain people that in my movies, like a supporting character or something, who changes their dialogue because they're a stand-up comedian or what have you, and that's fine. They make it funnier. That's good for me. But I haven't had the negative experience that I think you're hinting at of being sort of dictated to by a megalomaniac.
Well, what I was going to ask is if you ended up having any kind of requests like that, if you bring them into the writing process, or if you have a producer who comes in and says, hey, I want to make these notes, I want to make these changes. When you get these kind of notes as a professional Hollywood writer, this is why I'm getting at this. Do you bring them into the process? Do you just say, yes, take the note and fix it? Is there some back and forth there? Because there's writers at home who are going to be optioning their first script. They're going to be getting a gig. They might work with some talent that might have a great idea of where a line could go. And I want them to hear from a professional like yourself what they should do, how they should take it.
You're talking about notes from the actors or from everybody?
Right. Yes. Notes from actors, notes from producers, notes from sources that can really influence the script.
Okay. What I've discovered, and this is kind of a relief, is that the director and the producers will generally not want the actors to start piping in with comments and ideas, because they're trying to control this thing and keep it on the rails. And once you open that can of worms, you're in trouble. You want people's input, but you don't want them to run all over you, especially the director. He doesn't want to lose control of the script that he signed up to direct.
There you go.
So the director tends to protect you, unless the actor is someone super big and important, and then you work with them. But the director directing that person is also going to be super important and will keep that person in line so that they don't run away with it, unless you're dealing with an actor who's also the producer and what have you, or they're so big that
Gotcha. And there is more of that now, so I could see how that could be an issue. But it's really cool to hear you saying that the director really kind of does act as a buffer to really kind of keep that project in line. When you've created these films and you've gone into a pitching, for instance, like you had to pitch XXX, it sounds like you nailed your pitch, which is fantastic. But what about Airheads? I mean, when you had to pitch that, or it sounds like the dirt came to you, which is fantastic that you have gigs coming to you. But when you're out there pitching, what would you recommend for any of these up and coming writers?
Well, the world of pitching has changed a lot in 30 years. Nowadays, to be quite honest, pitching requires, at least in my experience on the studio level, you have to have an actor and a director and a producer when you go into pitch. It helps also to have the script. Okay. So that's when you're going after Netflix or Sony Pictures or whatever.
So you're talking about packaging.
Yeah.
Okay.
When you start out, the first element is going to be you hooking up with a producer, and the producer has an idea or you have an idea and you get to pitch them. They will more than likely say, okay, why don't you write it? I'll help you work on it. And then we'll try to get a director, and then we'll try to get an actor.
Cool.
That's generally how it works now. It's not like the old days where you could go in and give this 3-second pitch that I told you about, and the guy says, great kid, go home and start writing. But being interactive and collaborative with everyone is like the most important thing, because whoever you're working with wants to feel some ownership over the thing.
Yeah.
And as long as they're not, turning the Titanic into an airplane, why not, listen to their ideas and use the ones that you love and argue about the ones that you don't. But I used to have this attitude that I'm the writer, I know what is best.
Yeah.
And I realize now that I got a lot more experience, it's fine to just take some input. What's wrong? You get a good idea from someone. I don't care anymore. I don't care where the idea comes from. If it's great and it contributes to it, then fantastic. So try to get that ego out of the way and just work with the people, because they're going to be spending 2 years with you. You don't want to come across as somebody who's not fun to hang out with and collaborate with,
Yeah. I think that's true. I mean, get the ego out of the way. Collaboration is key, and really kind of look at screenwriting as an invitation to work together. And I think that can be something that can really help you in the industry and even take a project to another level. Like you said yourself, I mean, we think we know everything, but that doesn't mean that somebody else doesn't have a great idea that can really take the script to that next level, which is awesome. So
I'm sorry, but as an addendum to that, just think about the idea that 99% of the things you're going to write are not going to get made. The rule really is that the journey is the destination. If I'm not having fun collaborating with you, spending 6 months doing notes with you over the phone, on Zoom, whatever, then what's the point? Because that's most likely what you're going to get.
Yeah, I mean, that's the truth. When I collaborate with somebody, it's somebody I want to work with. It's somebody I want to have fun with, especially if you're doing like a comedy and you're writing together and you're cracking that person up from a bit. That to me is like gold. I mean, I can think of moments where I've done that with collaborators where it's like, oh, that felt so good. So I totally agree. I want to talk about Punk Like Me. Now, this isn't something I've been aware of, but this is a documentary that you did. And from what I understand, you've recently released it on streaming, right?
Yes. Yeah, we put it on Amazon. It's called Punk Like Me. It's a documentary about myself as a husband and father in his late 30s, lying his way onto the Warped Tour, because I never got to be in a touring band when I was a kid, and I always wanted to be in a band. So I lied my way into the Warped Tour by saying I was a writer for Rolling Stone magazine and I want to write an article about the Warped Tour, but you have to put my tour.
You really did that?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so they bought it and they were like, okay, cool. We could use an article at Rolling Stone. So they gave me a spot, but then my band broke up a month before the tour started. So I just emailed everybody I knew, said, hey, who can play an instrument? Let's put a band together. We're going on the tour. So I got a high school friend, one of my wife's college friends, a friend's younger brother, and we put together this band. And over the course of a weekend, wrote a half hour's worth of music. We rehearsed 3 times and then we went on the road. And we got a big tour bus, we got Melissa Etheridge's tour bus. And so we were a bunch of, late 30-something wannabes who lied their way onto the tour. And we are performing punk rock mariachi music. And the band name is Carne Asada. And we're doing, La Cucaracha and Guadalajara. And we're sort of like the sublime of mariachi music. So it gets complicated because my wife, once she realizes I actually made it onto the tour and I'm getting this tour bus, she doesn't want me to go on some, rolling bachelor party for the summer. So she wants to come and I make her tour manager. But then she wants to bring along our infant daughter because she doesn't want to be separated from her. But then she wants to be able to hang out and party. So we bring along the in-laws. So now I've got the wife, the kid, the in-laws on tour with me and my friends, playing punk rock and trying to live out these rock and roll fantasies. So the movie is called Punk Like Me because, I'm not a punk. And if you want to, if you just lie and have some gumption, you can be a punk like me. And so what I realized in the course of doing that documentary was you really have to write a screenplay for a documentary. It's not just about seeing what happens and then cutting it all together and a story emerges. You get hints of a story, but you have to sit down and you write a 60-page screenplay for an hour and a half documentary. There's narration, there's just sequencing all of this stuff.
Visuals,
what elements are going to carry through somebody, I lose my voice at a certain point, band members get into a fight, all of these things you get to extrapolate after the shooting is done and you see what is actually working. And that was a real interesting challenge and something totally new. I did not realize that people wrote documentaries, and I feel stupid about saying that, but it's a skill, man.
Okay, I gotta unpack some of this. One, that sounds like an editing nightmare, not having a screenplay and just hours and hours of footage. So that had to be you locking yourself in a dark room for weeks on end. All right. 2, you said you were press, but you weren't press. So what happened eventually when they discovered you weren't press? I mean, was there fallout?
No, because there was so long between the time that I pitched him the idea to the time that I was on the tour that he had forgotten all about it.
That's absolutely amazing.
The Warped Tour, there's 90 bands playing every day on 10 different stages. So the notion that he could keep track of all 90 bands and why they're there or what have you was, it was ridiculous.
Wow. Yeah, so and I've heard the Warped Tour was pretty wild,
Yeah, it's massive. So he saw the movie, the guy who runs the tour, Kevin Lyman, and he liked it, and he showed it on the tour the year following on one of their break days. They put up a big screen and watched it. And we went to South by Southwest and Coachella and San Francisco Doc Fest and all these places. Oh, that's great. With it. So there was no real fallout. And I did try to write it for Rolling Stone magazine. After they said yes, I called up Rolling Stone and said, "Hey, I would love to write about this." And they said, "Well, why do we want you?" I said, "All right, whatever."
That's awesome. No, I mean, I think that is a hell of a way to get something off your bucket list. And yeah, go ahead.
Jeffrey, here's the reality. It took 17 years to get The Dirt made. I was writing these blockbuster movies that were not getting made, right?
Yeah, right.
I'm frustrated. I want to do something. I want to make a movie. So I made my own documentary, and I taught myself how to write it, and I'm starring in this stupid documentary, and I had to write them. It was a whole new set of skills, and I can't emphasize enough how keep doing things, whether you're getting paid for them or not. Write a play, write a short story, write a graphic novel, write poetry. Just keep doing something instead of waiting around for lightning to strike on this one screenplay you wrote.
Yeah. No, I think that's great advice. I was going to ask you if you had any advice for writers, but I think you just nailed it.
I prefer not to give advice to writers. I don't want the competition.
Oh man, this is not a zero-sum game, but I love that. So Punk Like Me is available where?
Amazon. It's on Amazon.
Yeah. Wonderful. I'm going to check it out. It sounds amazing.
You can get your Carne Asada, the band's t-shirts on Redbubble.
I have to hear this music, and I think I'm going to be listening to that later on. All right, Rich, I want to say thank you so much for being on this show.
Of course, man. This has been a pleasure. Anytime, you get to talk about the craft, you sort of have to get introspective and think about what makes things work for you and why they work. And that way you can cut out the stuff that doesn't work and focus on the stuff that does. So just talking about the process helps the person who's doing the talking. You know what I mean? I think that's why these podcasts are so popular. I learn something every single time, not just when I'm listening, but, talking for a half hour about what I do.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel very thankful and blessed to be able to have an opportunity to speak with individuals like yourself, and it makes me a better writer. And then I could take all of that knowledge that I gained from you guys and try and disperse it on to my students as well. So it's all part of the chain, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, if there's people out there who don't know how to get into Hollywood or write a screenplay, this is such an invaluable resource that we didn't have when I was a kid. And you're making it real for people. It's accessible. Yeah. Oh, if this idiot can do it, then so can I. I don't have to live in Hollywood. I can be in Maine or Argentina, and still I can send my PDF someplace just like anybody else. You're demystifying it. And I think that's really, really cool.
It's so true. It's funny you say that. Today I had somebody reach out to me and wanted to thank me for the fact that they came to one of my seminars and they said, "Hey, do I have to live in LA?" And I said, "No, you don't have to live in LA. You can live wherever you want. You just have to push and push and push until somebody says yes." And they did that, and now they're optioned and they're getting brought onto a show. So I mean, it's just like, it can happen. You just have to strategize and have the will to do it.
That's fantastic. That was a great story. I love it.
Yeah. All right, Rich, thank you again.
Thank you for having me. This has been great.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share in your social media where you can tag us at The Successful Screenwriter.